Welcome, my name is Lauren Morton, and today I will be discussing the important influence that art has had on activism and protest. Throughout history, art has acted as a catalyst for change, sparking movements throughout society. I am here today on behalf of the art to argue why art is such an important form of activism. A couple of weeks ago, I took a stroll through the University of Kentucky's Art Museum, and I stumbled upon a very unique-looking art piece. Natalie Frank's A Tale with a Riddle. Something about the art piece stuck with me, and when I returned home it led me on a deep dive into Frank's collection of Brothers Grimm-inspired fairy tale paintings, which included this piece. When creating these chalk pastel drawings, Natalie had set out to express the unfiltered versions of the lesser-known original Brother Grimm tales. She was inspired to do this as an expression of feminism, as her paintings focus on the roles of women in these original stories, and I quote, recast these characters as complex feminist protagonists. That quote comes from Natalie's website, where you can read all about her various projects over the years and view a few snippets from her various books. That's right, what started as a few drawings sparked the inspiration for a whole retelling of the original Brothers Grimm tales. The book became a collaboration between historical literature scholars and feminist artists alike. There is much dialogue in the book accompanying the stories and the print versions of all 75 drawings that were part of her collection. So why exactly do I consider this art piece as a form of activism? Well, to start, activism is any sort of action taken to bring out or spark conversation about political or social change. This art piece did exactly that by inspiring the book, which held conversation and debates from different historians and artists. The change they wanted to see in the world was a social one. The original Brothers Grimm tales were spread and told through word of mouth by women. They were then published and popularized by men who invalidated and defiled these women in every story. These stories then became sensations, changing and being retold over and over throughout time, but the underlying misrepresentation of women remained. This art is begging for society to stop turning a blind eye towards how women are represented in media and do something about it. And the idea of art being a form of activism or protest isn't new. In fact, according to artbroker.com, it's very old. In ancient Egypt, lower-class artists would mock and complain about the pharaohs through their art, and there is evidence of ancient Greeks using art to challenge politics and social norms that were put in place at the time. Arguably, one of the most famous historical examples of protest art comes from the Italian Michelangelo during the Renaissance. His statue of David, or as it is referred to in some historical texts as the Giant, stands tall as a symbol of artistic freedom. At the time, the statue was created to resist against the Medici family's control over art and expression in Florence, and it also challenged how David was typically portrayed. However, its role in activism doesn't end there. Michelangelo's David sparked conversation and new controversy in April last year about how art should be appreciated. The tourism market in Florence was quick to thrive off of the statue's popularity and historical significance, which has more recently begun to bother historical curators. According to online newsletter Theweek, the religious and political history of the statue isn't being recognized by modern tourism. Instead, it is being defaced by the overuse of the statue in tacky merchandise and obscene gestures on t-shirts. The statue itself is nude, which has sparked many debates among countries who teach art history about the appropriateness of addressing the statue in schools. In Italy, they argue over expression. Should it be free or not? And should people be able to charge money for public domain art that was never meant to be charged for? There have been many protests in Italy, causing other European countries to quickly enact laws in a desperate attempt to protect their art and continue to be able to share their accurate history and representation of it. The most effective law comes from Greece, where in 2020 they passed a law that, quote, requires a permit to use images of historical sites or artifacts for commercial use, and forbids the use of images that alter or offend the monuments in any way. So this art, the statue of David, is clearly a form of activism. He sparked conversation that led to political change, both historically and currently. Of course, there are many more modern examples of activism artworks, as protesting with signs and images has become popularized as a way to have your voice be heard. One of a few that I deemed noteworthy is Barbara Kruger's Your Body is a Battleground from 1989. This art piece was part of the long, still continuing battle for the right for abortion. It was handed out as flyers during the 1989 March for Women's Equity and Women's Lives. The striking black and white image of a woman's face, spliced with positive and negative exposure panels, comments on the supposed beauty and softness of a woman being used against them. Art exhibit The Broad states, the woman's face, disembodied, split in positive and negative exposures, and obscured by text, marks a stark divide. The image is simultaneously art and protest, end quote. This piece argues that women have to fight for the right to their own bodies to avoid society's pressure to turn them into objects. This is one of the many modern examples of art used in protest. While many artists still use their art to spark new conversation, a lot of artists use their art to fuel an already ongoing conversation by contextualizing arguments in easy-to-understand formats. These art pieces are also becoming easier to spread via flyers or protest signage, so they can reach a much larger audience within the sphere of protest. Another new form of spreading activism artwork that has been spurred on by the modern era is the internet. Pictures and videos are so easily spread from person to person, and due to social media algorithms, each piece of art is more likely to have its message connect with someone or spark a debate. Artists are even using the internet to communicate with each other to collaborate and create far more compelling pieces. One example that I found of this was highlighted by the New York Times and was a video accompanying art from the 2019 Triple Chaser by Forensics Architecture. The video serves as a short documentary that investigated Warren B. Landers, the CEO of a weapons company that created tear gas that was used against immigrants, asylum seekers, and innocent civilians by police across the world. The video was a harsh commentary about the CEO's profiting off of violence and attempting to hide behind his status as the chair of a well-established museum. But as it turns out, the museum couldn't hide him from the art itself. The artwork within the video is created by a computer software. Individuals around the world were asked to send in photos or post pictures of any sort of tear gas or grenade-looking shells. The computer program would then analyze and highlight using bright colors the gas canisters that were manufactured by this specific weapons company. The result was a striking image where it was clear to see how much of an impact this one company was making on the oppression of others. This art piece sparked many conversations. The whole fight against the CEO and the commentary the documentary made about capitalistic downfalls of society was very public. And of course, along with conversation, this art piece did enact change. Landers, the CEO, was forced to resign as head of the museum and was shunned by the press and the large portion of London society where this whole debacle took place. But the piece continues to be relevant as the artists at Forensics Architecture continue to fight against the overproduction and misuse of weapons in underprivileged countries. To wrap up, I want to take a look at the overarching point I've been trying to make. Art is not only an extremely valid form of activism, but it has made a huge impact over time. It gives voice to those who may have been afraid to speak up, and it is timeless in its application. Art can say anything and be seen by anyone, especially with the adoption of the modern era and the internet. Thank you for listening, and I hope that this podcast inspires you to take a further look into the art that you're consuming and recognize how it is affecting you and society around you.